Okay, part 2 of the lip sync series. Let's make this guy start talking, or singing in our case. Okay, first I will make a new composition. I guess we could have him do it while he's doing jumping jacks. Maybe let's do that after, just as a review. So let's name this one lip sync, and we want all of these same settings. All that stuff is fine. Hit OK. And let's bring our same bald guy in here. And in this, oops, I don't want it on the puppet pin tool. Let's go to the arrow. Make him big enough to kind of fill the screen. You can make it as big as you want. You can zoom way in on the face, but we'll just leave that for now. Okay, so here's our guy. No, I do not. I must have clicked him with the puppet. Let's get rid of that puppet thing. Okay. Next, we need to import our audio file that we just recorded. So I remember that was in the documents. There it is, voiceover. Okay, and I am going to drag this down onto my timeline. Alright, now if I drop down this arrow here, and it goes to audio, and then I show the waveforms. There now we can kind of see where it gets louder. So we could go through here and animate his mouth by hand. Every time that it should be open, we could have the open mouth, and every time it should be closed, we could switch it back to the closed mouth. That will take forever. And luckily there is a way that After Effects can do that for us. So I'm just going to leave this as it is for now. I'm going to go in my bald guy layers and find the open mouth, and I'm going to put that on the layer on top here. Now remember, I resized this guy, so it means I'm going to have to resize this mouth to be the right size as well. I'm going to kind of match it where it should go, right about there. Also, I'm going to want him to blink, which means I want both the eyes open and the eyes blink on here. Now you're probably thinking, why are we doing both? You already have the open eyes. Well, you'll see. Okay, so I want to select both of these, eyes open and eyes blink. I'll hold shift to select both of them. And I'm going to resize those as well and try and get it about the same size as what's already there. There, now I can match those. Now what I'm going to do, I need to get rid of the open eyes that were there first. So first let's hide all of these things. So you can turn your layers on and off by clicking on this little eyeball tool. So I'm going to hide all those. And then inside my bald guy composition, see how this icon looks different than the others? It's because these are just the plain picture files, and this is all the pictures combined. So I'm going to double click on this. So now I am inside that composition, and we see all of these layers. Now that I've done that, I'm going to turn off his eyes. There we go. And now right here, see we have all these different compositions open. I can close this bald guy composition, and now I'm back to the lip sync. And see, now his eyes are gone. So I did that because we want to have control over the eyes here, to be able to choose, do I want to see this one or do I want to see this one? All right. Okay, so let's turn off the, well, I'm going to leave those both there for now. Open mouth. Let's turn that on. Then with this, I'm just going to do the mouth first, and then we'll do the blinking after that. So with this mouth selected, I'm going to hit T for, I don't know, transparent, I guess, but that brings up this thing called opacity. The other thing you can do is just hit the arrow here in your transform settings. There's opacity. Alright, I want this to start out at 0. So see how it, as I adjust that, it goes either transparent. If it's at 0, it's totally see-through. You don't see it at all. If it's at 42, it's kind of transparent. So I'm going to set that at 0 for now. Now I want to click on my voiceover track, and I'm going to go up here to Animation, Keyframe Assistant, Convert Audio to Keyframes. Okay, I did that, and notice how it created this new track called Audio Amplitude. I'm going to drop this down. I'm also going to move this up so I can see more of my layers. And here I want to show effects. And we've got left channel, right channel, both channels. I'm going to just delete the left and the right channels. So I just click on them and then hit delete. Both channels. I'm going to drop that down, and now we have this thing called a slider. And you'll see as I move the timeline, see once it gets over where these waveforms are, see how this number goes up? So that number is basically showing the volume of the voice. So right here, it's pretty loud, so that's at a 34. Just below that, it gets quiet, so that's at a 2. So when I did that keyframe assistant, it analyzed the volume of here and then put in a number for each frame. And we're going to use that so it can animate itself. Alright, so now we want to see the open mouth and the opacity, and I'm going to hold the Alt button or Option and click on this little stopwatch thing. So that drops this thing down. This is called an expression, and this is where we can type in something. But before I do that, I want to look for this little thing called a pick whip, a little swirl. I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to drag it up here to this slider for the volume. And then see how it filled in all of this text? So now what it's doing is it's kind of attaching the opacity to the volume. So it's saying, I want you to check and see what the volume is. Now I'm going to add a little bit of code here. I'm going to type if it is greater than, and I'm going to choose a number of at what point I want his mouth to be open. So let's say we want it open here. It's at about a volume of 15. So let's try that. Go here, greater than 15. And you put question mark. That means it's going to check. Is it greater than 15? If so, we'll put 100, meaning the opacity will be 100% and we will see the open mouth. Then we put a colon, and that means if not, then set the opacity at 0. So our opacity will always be either 100 or 0, depending on what the volume is of the mouth. Alright, let's test this out now. So I'm going to hit the space bar. Never gonna give you up, never gonna let you down. Okay, so it's kind of working. It looks like I set the volume here at too high of a number because he's not opening his mouth right here. It doesn't open it until halfway through that line. So let's go back here and readjust the volume to something lower. Let's put it at 8. And this will all just depend on how loud your voice was when you recorded it. So just test this out until it gets about right. Never gonna give you up, never gonna let you down. There we go. Okay, so we've got him singing. Let's drag this back down so I can see his eyes. Now, for the eyes, we're going to do something a little bit different. Let's collapse this so it's not getting in the way, or this, or that. So I just want to see the eyes layer. I'm going to select both the open and the blink, and I'm going to hit T on the keyboard. That brings up opacity for both of those. Now, whichever one of these is at 100%, I want the other one to be at 0%. So let's start out with the open eyes at 100. Oops, I have them both selected. Click off something. I want the blinking one to be at 0. Okay, and then let's say at 1 second, I want them to blink. So I'm going to zoom in here. If you click down here where these mountains are, we can zoom in. So I'm going to click on the stopwatch here, and that will put this diamond, which is a keyframe. If you remember, we did this when we were moving the guy to do jumping jacks. So here's the keyframes. So that's saying at 1 second, this will be at 100%, this will be at 0. And it will be that all the way before that as well. Then I'm going to go 1 frame to the right, which over here in your preview settings, you can click this arrow, next frame, like that. And I'm going to swap them. Switch that to 0, switch that to 100. And I'll make that last for 2 frames. 1, 2, and then I'm going to switch them back. Boom, boom. Okay. Now our problem is here we want his eyes to stay closed for 2 frames, but this frame in between the two, they're both semi-transparent because it's moving from one to the other. So I want them to stay on their value instead of transitioning. So I'm going to click and drag so I select all these keyframes, and then I'm going to right click on any one of them and click this toggle hold keyframe. So that's going to change the shape of them, and that means it's not going to adjust in between the keyframes. So on this one it'll stay at this value until you get here, and then it'll just switch immediately. Alright, so now I can do the same thing over here. Let's switch it to 100 there, or 0. Whoops, do I have them both selected again? Want that at 100 and this at 0, because he's going to blink again right there. And then I'll go 2 frames over and switch that back to 100 and that back to 0. And then let's have him blink. I'll zoom out one more time over here. Switch that to 0, switch that to 100. Go over 2 frames. Back to 100, back to 0. Okay, now let's try that out. Hit space. Never gonna give you up, never gonna let you down. So I'd probably have him blink a few more times, or move it to a different space. I can select those and just move them over here. They're a little more spread out. Never gonna give you up, never gonna let you down. Or maybe if he's really getting into the song, let's say at this point he's really getting into it, and so he wants his eyes to stay closed for a while. Let you down. A little bit longer. We just want to make sure that these two match, because that's when they're switching. Let you down. Yeah, he's really feeling it there. Never gonna let you down. Good. Okay, so let's export this thing. I'm going to go over here to my edge of the workplace, or what's that called? Work area. I'll just drag it to the end of where he's singing. This is the audio file here. And again, we'll go File, Export, Add to Render Queue. And I have my default settings at H.264. You probably don't yet, but you can choose it from your settings here. And then click on the word for this. Tell it where you want it to save. Mine's going to my movies file. Save, and we hit render. And then you'll have your finished video in that movies folder. So, good luck.